dares to challenge centuries of silence, when a single human stands against a galaxy drowning in red tape. This is the story of courage, of rebellion, not through weapons, but through truth. A system built on tradition is about to face a woman who doesn't play by the rules, and the galaxy will never be the same. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and show some love by giving this video a thumbs up. Now, let's move toward this wonderful story. Neera Fallon had never seen anything like the Interstellar Council chamber. It stretched high above her, a dome of shifting stars and soft glowing panels, its ceiling mimicking the night skies of 1,000 worlds. Delegates from every known corner of the galaxy filled their designated platforms, speaking in hums, flickers, and vibrations, all translated in real time through the air by the chamber's voice field. It was beautiful, in a cold and distant kind of way, like watching a snowstorm from inside a glass tower. But Neera wasn't here to admire the view. She was here to change things. She just hadn't realized how broken everything was until now. It had been 15 hours since the emergency session had started. The crisis on the planet Yalara was worsening by the hour. Fires from beneath the crust were tearing through cities, earthquakes had sunk entire regions, and the air was turning toxic. Millions were at risk. But here, in the chamber that was supposed to protect the galaxy's future, the discussion had not moved past whether or not the Council should officially recognize Yalara's disaster as a Stage 4 planetary disturbance, or simply a localized atmospheric anomaly pending confirmation. Neera sat in stunned silence for most of it, listening to polite debates that went nowhere. The air was thick with protocol, every word measured, every motion seconded and rephrased and repeated. She had only been appointed Earth's envoy 2 weeks ago. Her background wasn't politics. It was crisis negotiation. Flood zones, war zones, places where hesitation cost lives. She had saved lives using a pen, a plan, and often just a few well-placed words. That was what she thought this job would need. What she hadn't expected was the fog of procedure that hung over everything like smoke. On Earth, she had faced chaos. Here, she faced something worse: delay. She glanced around. The representative from the Shalar cluster was explaining why the exact classification of the disaster affected the type of robe their ceremonial envoy would need to wear during any official relief declaration. The word robe echoed around the chamber like an insult. Neera's jaw clenched. She had stayed quiet, respectful, even as the frustration boiled inside her. But when the session chair declared yet another break, to allow time for a period of quiet reflection, Neera stood. Her voice cut through the chamber with surprising force. "People are dying," she said simply. Every translator buzzed in unison as her words reached every delegate. The room quieted, stunned. She took a step forward onto the central platform. 15 hours, that's how long we've been here today. You've discussed terminology, traditions, the symbolism of planetary classifications. What you haven't discussed is how to help. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The chair tried to regain control, but Neera didn't stop. "I've watched children suffocate in burning air. I've seen mothers carry their injured through collapsing cities. I've worked in disaster zones where every second counts. And now I've sat through 2 weeks of sessions where nothing gets decided because everyone is afraid to break a rule written 5,000 years ago." The representative from the Shalar stood to object, but Neera raised her hand. "I know. I'm new. I know humans haven't been part of this council for long, but I also know this. If you wait for a perfect plan approved by every committee in this chamber, there won't be a Yalara left to save." The chamber stayed quiet, but not silent. A few murmurs rippled through the platforms. Not disagreement. Curiosity. Neera looked at the session chair. This council was built to protect the galaxy, not to protect its own procedures. So I'm asking you, no, I'm begging you, stop talking. Start acting. Let's mobilize relief. Let's use the technology we have. Let's save who we still can. The chair, A tall, three-eyed being named Chorus gave her a measured look. "Ambassador Fallon," he said slowly, "you are out of order." "Maybe," Nira replied, "but so is this entire chamber." That was when something unexpected happened. A soft clicking sound came from the platform of General Oros, a silent observer from the warrior planet of Vascan. He stood, something almost like a nod offered in Nira's direction. One by one, a few other representatives straightened. Some only watched, some whispered to aides, but for the first time no one reached for the next procedural form. No one asked for a recess. Nira knew she had crossed a line. She could feel it in the silence. But she also knew something else. They were listening. Maybe not all, but enough. She turned back to her seat, her hands shaking slightly. She wasn't sure what would happen next. Maybe she would be sanctioned. Maybe Earth would be scolded for lack of diplomatic discipline. But as she sat, the chamber still hushed, Nira smiled to herself. For the first time since arriving at Sky Vault, she felt like she'd done something that mattered. Sometimes one voice is enough to start a storm. The next day, everything felt different in the Interstellar Council chamber. The silence from the Yao end of the previous session still echoed in the hallways. Nira Fallon walked through them with a strange mix of determination and nerves. She had expected consequences for her outburst, maybe a warning, maybe even being replaced. But instead she had been summoned again, not to face punishment, but to speak before the high table. That hadn't happened for a new envoy in over a century. As she approached the chamber doors, Ambassador Thuv was waiting. The tall insect-like delegate moved with stiff precision, his many eyes narrowing as she approached. "Ambassador Fallon," he said, his voice a buzzing hum. "I trust you are ready to speak within the proper guidelines today." His tone was sharp but not cruel, more like a teacher scolding a student. Nira gave a calm nod. "I'm always ready to speak," she replied, then added, "but I make no promises about guidelines." Thuv let out a long click of disapproval and moved aside. Inside the chamber, the seats were more crowded than usual. Word had spread about Nira's speech. Some had come expecting more disruption. Others hoped to see her silenced. But one thing was clear. Everyone was paying attention. The chair called the meeting to order, his voice smooth and formal. "We welcome the representative from Earth," he said. "She may address the chamber for 5 minutes." Nira stepped onto the central platform. Her hands were steady now, her voice even. "I appreciate the time," she began. "But I'm not here to give another speech. I'm here to show you something." She turned and waved toward the chamber entrance. The crowd stirred as 2 security officers entered, not dragging someone in, but escorting someone important. A tall, robed figure, regal and dignified, walked stiffly down the aisle. His silver robe shimmered with light from the chamber's ceiling, and his movements were slow but purposeful. This was High Minister Calrex, one of the most powerful voices in the council, the man whose vote alone could block any emergency action. And today, Nira had asked him to come with her. Gasps filled the air as Nira gently took Calrex by the arm, not roughly but firmly, and led him toward the large viewing platform at the back of the chamber. The security guards hesitated, but didn't interfere. The chamber had rules, but no one had ever planned for this. At the edge of the platform, Nira entered a code into the control panel. The dome above them shifted, the stars fading, replaced by a real-time view of Yalara. The planet now looked worse than it had days before. Its skies red with ash, storms tearing across its surface, oceans boiling away into steam. Fires lit the dark side of the planet like angry veins. And across it all, a data feed ran numbers, too fast for most to process: temperatures, casualty estimates, evacuation status. The room had gone completely still. "This is happening right now," Nira said. "We're watching it die." Calrex tried to pull back, but Nira didn't let go. "Not yet." "You told me yesterday," she continued, her voice loud and clear, "that action without process leads to chaos. But inaction because of process leads to death." Calrex looked around at the silent chamber, then finally spoke. His voice was low, the kind that carried not through volume but weight. "You are making a scene, Ambassador." "I'm making a point," Nira answered. Thuv rose from his seat, his voice shaking with frustration. "This is not how diplomacy is conducted." "No," Nira replied without turning around. "This is how lives are saved." She released Calrex's arm, and he stepped back, adjusting his robe. He did not speak again. He only watched the display, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the swirling storms of Yalara. "I know tradition matters to you," Nira said, turning to face the crowd again. "It should, but tradition is a tool, not a cage. You don't honor it by following every rule blindly. You honor it by using its wisdom to help people when they need you most." The silence broke, slowly. A quiet murmur moved through the chamber. General Oro stood again, and this time, he spoke. "I have seen war," the towering soldier said. "I have led my people through fire, and I say this to you, the ambassador is right. What is the point of strength if it is not used to protect the helpless?" Others followed. The representative from the floating Kiala spores offered a soft, glowing pulse, their way of showing agreement. Even a few of the more rigid delegates exchanged uncertain glances. The mood had shifted. A line had been crossed, and for once maybe that was a good thing. The chair of the session cleared his throat. "Ambassador Fallon," he said slowly, "you have presented a different path. You risk breaking procedure." "I don't want to break the council," Nira said quietly. "I want to wake it up." The screen above continued to show Yalara's slow destruction, but now the delegates saw more than a disaster. They saw a mirror. The council had a choice: continue the way it always had, or change before it was too late. The council didn't act immediately. That would have been too much to hope for. But something had shifted after Nira Fallon showed them the truth. The next day a vote was held, not on emergency aid itself, but on whether the rules could be bent enough to allow a special commission to create a faster response plan for future crises. The motion passed. Barely. But it passed. Nira was named lead coordinator, not by title but by need. No one else seemed willing to handle the mess they had all helped create. She accepted, not because she wanted recognition, but because she didn't trust anyone else to actually do something. They gave her a room on the council's third level, a place usually reserved for ceremonial planning. Nira and her team turned it into what she called the war room, even though most of them had never seen a war. Every wall was covered in charts, maps, timelines, and ideas scribbled in every known language. Species who barely agreed on gravity now had to agree on a new way to respond to disaster. It was chaos at first, and then slowly the chaos started to take shape. She wasn't alone anymore. Senator Molan, a being who looked like a moving tree, joined her team. He was slow to speak but sharp when he did. He reminded everyone to keep calm and think deeply. Fosker, a being made entirely of shimmering crystals, offered precise data modeling and predictions. He didn't speak in words but used light pulses that the room system translated into perfect analysis. Slowly, others joined. A translator from the Elari moons. A systems designer from the Luro Confederation. Even a young delegate from the Drachna, a species known more for their pride than for diplomacy. Nira brought them all in. She didn't care where they came from, only that they cared. But working together was harder than anyone expected. Every species brought their own fears and expectations. The Taxian hive mind insisted that nothing could be decided without a collective vote from their homeworld, which took days. The Quantum Possibilities Collective argued that acting too fast might affect other timelines. One representative worried that rapid changes would set a dangerous precedent. Another feared that giving power to a new system would take power away from the council itself. Nira heard them all out, but she also kept them moving. "Do you want perfect or do you want better?" she asked during one tense meeting. "Because we can't afford to wait for perfect." Bit by bit, the team began to agree on something. The system was broken. Not because people didn't care, but because they had built too many layers of safety. Procedures meant to prevent harm had become barriers that stopped any action at all. No one wanted to destroy the council's values. They just wanted a way to protect lives without waiting months for approval. After 2 weeks of long days and longer nights, they had something. A new emergency protocol that allowed for fast decisions in extreme situations. It was built on trust and transparency. It didn't remove oversight. It simply moved it after the fact. If a crisis was confirmed by 3 different systems, aid could be deployed immediately, and the council would review it later. It wasn't perfect, but it could save lives. The night before the plan was due to be presented, Neera stayed in the war room alone. Everyone else had gone to rest. She stood before the central display, reading the final draft over and over, making small changes, checking translations, double-checking terminology. She was exhausted. The council cafeteria's version of coffee had kept her awake, though it tasted like burnt leaves and metal. She didn't hear the door open at first. "You worked too hard," came a voice behind her. She turned. It was High Minister Calrex, again without his usual guards. He looked at the flowcharts on the walls and the notes scattered across every surface. "This is what change looks like," Neera said quietly. "Messy, slow, and full of arguments." Calrex nodded, hands clasped behind his back. "Will it work?" "I think it will," she answered. "It doesn't replace the council. It respects it. But it lets people act when every second matters." He walked toward the main screen and studied the diagrams. "In over 5,000 years, we've changed protocol only a handful of times," he said. 7, to be exact. Neera gave a tired smile. "Then maybe it's time for number 8. Calrex chuckled softly. "You humans measure time in minutes, we measure it in millennia. That's the thing about humans," Neera said, walking beside him. "We don't wait for forever. We fix what's in front of us." They stood in silence for a while, looking at the display. The plan wasn't flashy, it wasn't revolutionary, but it was something the council had never managed before. Fast, fair, and flexible. A blueprint that could adapt. The minister finally spoke. "Tomorrow you present this to the chamber." "I know," she said. "And after that?" he asked. Neera shrugged. "We see if the galaxy is ready to change." The council chamber was fuller than ever. Every platform was occupied. Lights from hundreds of recording drones floated in the air, capturing every moment for the networks that would broadcast across the stars. Delegates whispered in their own languages, voices low, some curious, some tense. Everyone had come for one reason. Today, Neera Fallon would present the emergency protocol reforms, plans born from weeks of hard work, endless discussion, and a quiet desperation to finally make a difference. Neera stood at the central platform, calm on the outside but bracing herself inside. She had practiced this presentation dozens of times. Still, standing in the center of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful political body, she couldn't help but feel the weight of every eye watching her. She took a breath and began. She explained the need first, not through dramatic words, but through facts. She spoke of Yalara's near collapse, the lives lost while the council debated, the delays caused by rules that hadn't been questioned in centuries. She didn't accuse or blame. She simply pointed to what had happened and what didn't happen, fast enough. Then she turned to the solution. The new protocol was simple. If 3 separate monitoring systems confirmed a planet-wide crisis, emergency actions could be approved immediately by a task force formed from diverse council members. Action first, review second. Resources would be deployed based on urgency, not ceremony. There would be oversight, of course, but it would happen after help had already been sent. The council would maintain its authority, but with flexibility. Some delegates nodded, others frowned. But no one interrupted. Neera continued, outlining each step clearly, walking them through the safeguards, the checks and balances. She explained how every region, every species, would have equal voice in emergency leadership. She answered the unspoken fears by reminding, Them that the protocol didn't remove tradition. It simply made it stronger by connecting it to purpose. When she finished, silence fell. Then slowly the chair of the council stood. "Delegates," he said, "you have heard the proposal. You may now vote." One by one, the lights above each platform lit up. Green for yes, red for no, yellow for abstain. At first, there were only a few greens, then more, then a flood. Red lights blinked here and there, but they were outnumbered. The final tally appeared on the main screen. The protocol had passed. The chamber broke into applause. Not loud, not all at once, but genuine. Delegates clapped in their own ways, with hands, wings, tendrils, pulses of light. Even those who hadn't supported the vote showed a quiet respect. Something had changed. Nira stood still, surprised by the relief she felt. She hadn't realized how much she had needed this win. Not for herself, but for the people she had seen on screens, struggling, dying, waiting for help that had taken too long. High Minister Calrex stepped forward, raising his voice. This day marks the beginning of a better system, one that honors our past while accepting the urgency of our present. I would like to name Ambassador Fallon as director of the new Emergency Response Division, to guide this protocol into action. The chamber responded with murmurs of agreement, but Nira didn't speak right away. When she finally did, her voice was steady but softer than before. "I'm honored," she said, "but I must decline." The room stilled again. Even Calrex looked confused. "I didn't come here to lead a new department," she explained. "This isn't about giving one person power. It's about changing how we think. If we build a system that depends on one voice, then we've already failed. We need a process that works whether I'm here or not." A long pause followed. Then a sound rippled through the chamber. Not disapproval, but understanding. "I propose," Nira continued, "that the council rotate this responsibility across all regions. A shared duty, a shared voice. Let it be led by a coalition of representatives, not one individual. Let it reflect the galaxy we are trying to protect." Minister Calrex gave a slow nod. "That is unusual, but wise." The vote was held. Again, and this time the agreement was nearly unanimous. A rotating council would lead emergency responses, drawing members from all sectors of the galaxy, and the first meeting would begin that very day. Nira stepped down from the platform, feeling a wave of exhaustion mixed with quiet pride. She hadn't become a hero. She hadn't seized control. She had just helped the galaxy remember what it was supposed to stand for. As she passed the rows of delegates, many nodded. Some smiled. One even reached out a hand, a gesture of thanks from a species that hadn't spoken a word in the chamber for decades. Outside the council building, the stars looked the same, but something in the air felt different, lighter, hopeful. Nira looked up, then turned to leave. Her work here was done, not finished, but started, by many hands, many voices. And that was exactly the future she had hoped for.